Here's everything you need to know about the Karen Read trial as we await the jury, who is expected to return any moment today with a verdict. Read is accused of killing her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, with her SUV in 2022. Her first trial began in 2024 in April, and it was a mistrial. Her second trial started again in April of just this year, and the jury is now out deliberating. Her defense is arguing that she was framed, and not just by anyone, by the law enforcement people that John worked with in an elaborate cover-up to make her look like she killed John O'Keefe when in fact they may have. On January 29th of 2022, Karen and her boyfriend John ended up going to the Waterfall Bar and Grill in Canton with a bunch of friends to have some drinks. Now, Karen did consume several alcoholic drinks, and unfortunately, later on, she got behind the wheel and drove her boyfriend John to a friend's house. It was Brian Albert. He was also a police officer, and this is where everyone was supposedly going back to for drinks. Court documents have now shown that in the weeks and even hours leading up to his death, the two of them were having a strained relationship. They were not in the best place. And at about 1 a.m. on January 29th, Read allegedly left O'Keefe a voicemail that said, "You are an effing loser, F yourself, and John, I effing hate you." At about 4:23 a.m., John's niece ends up calling the home where he was supposedly partying at. Now, Karen had left him there and gone home. So the niece was staying at John's house, and she called the owner of the home, who was Jennifer McCabe, and said that Karen Read was distraught because he never came home that night. Jennifer McCabe said she could hear Karen Read yelling in the background saying, "John didn't come home, we had a fight." Around 5 a.m., Karen called another friend whose husband hung out with John, again saying that he hadn't come home. And at 5:07, Read, McCabe, and the third woman ended up driving around looking for John. Now, the prosecution alleges that at this time, Karen said to them, "What if he's dead? What if a plow hit him? I don't remember anything from last night. We drank so much, I don't remember anything." Prosecutors say when she was driving around with the other two women, she allegedly said she had a crack in her taillight and wondered if she could have hit O'Keefe. At about 5:07, a surveillance camera at O'Keefe's house shows Read's SUV coming extremely close to O'Keefe's SUV in the driveway. Now, prosecutors say that there was no pieces of the taillight in the driveway, but the defense says that night Karen hit his SUV and that's why the taillight was cracked. At 6 a.m., Karen spots John in the snow outside of Albert's home, which is the home she had left him at the night before. Now, emergency responders said that she was absolutely hysterical and she kept saying, "I hit him, I hit him." Now, her defense says that the emergency responder actually gave false information and that it was false and deceptive testimony to the grand jury that would later indict Read. On January 29th of 2022, the defense and prosecution agrees that someone at that time Googled the morning they found John deceased, "How long does it take someone to die in the cold?" Prosecution is saying that this Google search took place between 6:23 a.m. and 6:24 a.m., but defense is saying that it happened around 2:27 a.m. That same day, police say that at the scene beside John, they ended up finding a broken cocktail glass and pieces of a taillight at the scene. A forensic toxicologist ended up estimating what Read's blood alcohol level would be because, of course, she had gone home that night and slept, so she was not tested. They're thinking that she must have been around 0.13 to 0.29, which is way more than the legal limit. January 31st was John O'Keefe's autopsy, and the medical examiner said that the cause of death was blunt impact injuries to the head and hypothermia, and the medical examiner did not find any obvious signs of an altercation or a fight. Karen Read was arrested, and on February 2nd, she appeared in district court for the first time, pleading not guilty to manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision causing death. On June 10th, 2022, a Norfolk County grand jury indicts Karen Read on charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence of alcohol, and leaving the scene of personal injury and death. She was arraigned on these new charges, pled not guilty, and was being held on $100,000 bail. She ended up paying the bail, and she's been out on release ever since. On May 3rd, 2023, Karen's defense attorneys, Alan Jackson and David Yannetti, alleged that John O'Keefe was involved in a fight inside Brian Albert's home. Now, they claim that O'Keefe was beaten and his body was later dumped outside. Jackson and Yannetti focused on the wounds to O'Keefe's upper arms, which they said got there because he ended up being attacked by Albert's dog because he was inside the home during the fight. This is the photo of John's arm that was shown in court. Now, again, the defense is saying that these injuries were caused by a dog. However, the assistant district attorney, Adam Lally, argued and said that he never went in the home. He added saying there's no evidence that Mr. O'Keefe was beaten and left for dead. During a pretrial hearing on May 24th, 2023, her attorneys spoke for the first time and laid out what they claim happened. This is what they said. Certainly, the Massachusetts State Police are involved. There are people that were in that house that are involved. Brian Albert is involved. Jennifer McCabe is involved. The rest of the folks that were in that house, there's some level of involvement by every one of them. Every single one of them. We're not going to rest until we get to the bottom of exactly who's behind this cover-up. Not only Karen Read deserves this, John O'Keefe deserves this, and has deserved this from moment one. And that's why they're not going to rest. After this hearing, Karen Read spoke to reporters for the first time, saying, "We know who did it. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know. I tried to save his life. I tried to save his life at 6 a.m. in the morning. I was covered in his blood. I was the only one trying to save his life." On August 1st, the judge denied a gag order that the prosecution had asked for, claiming that witnesses were being harassed, and her lawyers responded saying that the prosecutors were the one controlling the narrative. And on August 25th, the Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey released a video statement slamming what he described as absolutely baseless harassment of witnesses in the case. He went on to say, "Conspiracy theories are not evidence. The idea that multiple police departments, EMTs, fire personnel, the medical examiner, and the prosecuting agency are joined in or taken in by a vast conspiracy should be seen for what it is, completely contrary to the evidence and a desperate attempt to reassign guilt." On October 11th, 2023, Turtle Boy, otherwise known as Aidan Kearney, was arrested for witness intimidation. He runs the blog site Turtle Boy News, and he'd been covering the Karen Read trial. He was even recording himself going up to witnesses and confronting them. His lawyer claimed that he was just exercising his Fifth Amendment rights and he was released on bail. However, 2 months later, on December 26th, a judge revoked his bail amid new assault and battery charges. So he allegedly went to his ex-girlfriend's home, demanded to see her phone, and then shoved her during a confrontation. He remained in jail for about 2 months, and then he was released on personal recognizance. On February 22nd of 2024, in court filings, it was revealed that the prosecution believed they had DNA evidence that would tie Karen to John's death based on her taillight from her SUV. They said the pieces of the taillight they found near John matched her SUV, that they had DNA on them from John, and that he also had pieces of the taillight on his clothing. A couple of weeks later, on March 12th, her lawyers said that this led to a federal investigation into the case where an FBI expert concluded that the evidence does not support that John O'Keefe was hit and killed by an SUV. This is what he said. The damage on the car was inconsistent with having made contact with John O'Keefe's body. In other words, the car didn't hit him and he wasn't hit by the car. The next day, on March 13th, the Massachusetts State Police issued a brief statement saying that they had opened an internal investigation into a potential violation of department policy by Trooper Michael Proctor. He was the lead investigator in the case. Now, police didn't state what led to this investigation, but that he remained on full duty, and her team said that the federal investigation showed Proctor hid personal ties to people involved in the case. Now, his lawyer also released a statement saying that he was being fully cooperative and said, to be clear, Trooper Proctor remains steadfast in the integrity of the work he performed investigating the death of Mr. John O'Keefe. To the extent that Trooper Proctor's personal text messages are alluded to in court proceedings regarding Miss Read, he respectfully submits that the objective investigative steps he and members of his unit took are in no way undermined by the content of the personal messages. On April 16th, 2024, jury selection began for the trial of Karen Read. On April 29th, everything got started with opening statements and testimonies, as well as the first witnesses on the stand. John O'Keefe's brother Paul and his wife Erin were on the stand, as well as a bunch of paramedics and firefighters, and the jury listened to the 911 call from that day as well. Several Canton police officers discussed their handling of the crime scene, and defense also went after Sergeant Michael Lank, who they said had personal connections to the home where John O'Keefe's body was found in 2022. On May 10th, retired Boston police officer Brian Albert took the stand. Now, he had owned the home where allegedly John Keefe had gone for the party. He claims that Karen and John never entered the home. A woman who was at this party claimed that she had seen a black blob in the lawn as she was leaving, but defense said it was a made-up story. Jennifer McCabe was also on the stand, and she is a key witness in this case because she is the woman that was with Karen Reed the morning that they found John. Now, she claims that Karen had her Google, how long does it take to die in the cold? But as you know, defense claims that that actually happened before John was found and sometime late through the night. A Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives agent, Brian Higgins, was on the stand, and he was presenting flirty text messages between him and Karen the week that John had died. Now, he is one of the people that they allege could have been responsible for killing John that night. A lot of the testimony focused around the broken taillight. They watched some videos as well that were played that showed Karen drinking a lot of cocktails that night. So Trooper Proctor also took the stand, and as you know, he was under investigation by the Massachusetts State Police for his conduct in the case, though the specific reasons were not known at this time, but he denied any wrongdoing at all. When he took the stand, he started reading derogatory text messages that he had actually sent to friends and colleagues about Reed while investigating the case. One of the text messages that they really grilled him on was one message he sent saying that he hopes Karen kills herself. On June 25th, attorneys presented their closing arguments and the jury began to deliberate. On the fourth day, June 28th, jurors sent a letter to the judge saying that they were deadlocked, and the judge said they had not deliberated long enough and sent them back. On July 1st, they once again sent a letter to the judge saying that they were deeply divided. Now, the judge asked them to go have one final round of deliberations, which they did, and later in the day, a mistrial was declared. Just hours after the mistrial was declared, Trooper Michael Proctor, the man who was being questioned over his conduct and text messages, was relieved of duty. A lot went down in the next few days. So on July 8th, Reed's defense attorneys filed a motion to dismiss for 2 of the charges. On July 8th, Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor was suspended without pay following a duty hearing. On the 9th, the Union for the Massachusetts State Police responded to the suspension, saying it was disappointing. On July 9th, the Board of Selectmen announced that the Canton police officer Kevin Albert was also put on leave, and this was related to Proctor's testimony during the trial. It then started coming out that the jurors wanted to acquit Karen on 2 of the counts, but they didn't know how to do this and they didn't know how to ask. So her lawyers were trying to get those 2 counts dropped, and prosecution, of course, was not going for this, saying that she agreed to the mistrial. On September 12th, the Canton police officer, Kevin Albert, who's the brother, of course, of Brian Albert, who owned the home, he gets put back on the job after his leave that he had during the trial. But then on September 23rd, he gets suspended without pay, but only for 3 8-hour shifts. Now, he's suspended for what is being called as unbecoming of a police officer and violated department policies about alcohol consumption or possession on the job. That same day, it's also announced that another sergeant has to forfeit 5 of his vacation days because he is in the group chats that were with Trooper Michael Proctor when he sent inappropriate text messages. On October 29th and 30th, Karen did an interview with Vanity Fair where she revealed that she owed $5 million in legal fees. The judge had then scheduled a retrial for Karen Reed, but the date was going to be set for January 27th. But on November 4th, the defense and the prosecution asked for this to be postponed until April 1st of 2025, and it was granted. On March 19th, Michael Proctor, who was the trooper being charged with misconduct for his texting, was fired. On April 1st of 2025, the second trial for Karen Reed got underway, and on April 22nd is when we had opening statements. On April 23rd, John O'Keefe's mother, Peggy, takes the stand, and it's the first time we've heard her publicly speak about the situation. On April 25th, the jurors were all taken to Brian Albert's former home. This is where John O'Keefe had been found that morning. On April 29th, Jen McCabe, who was a key witness in this situation, took the stand. Now, she's the woman who was with Karen Reed when John was found. She's also the woman who did the Google search about how long does it take to die in the cold. Now, she ended up on the stand for about 2 days, and she had a pretty tense cross-examination from Karen's lawyers. A lot of the same witnesses that had testified in the first trial were testifying again, the paramedics, fire department, police officers, as well as going through a crash reconstruction. And on June 4th, a snowplow driver named Brian, who goes by Lucky Loughran, testified that he didn't see a body on the lawn the night that John O'Keefe died. Now, this was extremely important because they were saying that Karen hit him and that he didn't even make it into the party. But this snowplow driver says that he is up high and would have been able to see everything and that he did not see a body that night when he was plowing. On June 13th, we had closing arguments, and both sides had a completely different view of what exactly went down when John O'Keefe passed, and then the jurors started deliberating. June 16th was the first full day jurors deliberated, and on June 17th, they had 4 questions submitted to the judge. One of them sought clarity on what happens if they agree to not guilty on 2 charges, but are hung on the 3rd charge. And the judge basically said, I can't answer this. You guys can't worry about what the consequences for Karen are going to be. You just have to say if you think guilty or not guilty. It is June 18th today, and the jurors were deliberating for a 4th day, and they have now come back with a verdict. So jurors acquitted Reed of 2nd-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence, and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. Now, they did find her guilty and convicted her of driving under the influence of alcohol, and the judge sentenced her to 1 year probation. That is it for Karen Reed. She has probation for 1 year because of the drunk driving, but she has officially been acquitted of killing John O'Keefe, and they cannot retrial her.